MTDCNC podcast, sponsored by Langle Alloys, unique metals for demanding applications, providing first-class performance and an international service.
Welcome to today's MTDCNC podcast. Today I am with a lovely gentleman called Rodney Rice, and we are at Langle Alloys. Now, it's a big celebration, really, because they are our new sponsors. We're very excited about this. But today we're going to find out more about who they are, why they believe they're the number one place to go for high-performance stainless and nickel alloys. But also we're going to have a little bit of fun along the way, because I'm going to be quizzing him on the weird and wonderful things that the metal industry demand of him and his company, but also some of the strangest requests he gets, and maybe some of the proudest moments that he's had during his time in this industry. So I'm very excited about this one. So Rodney, before we begin and find out a little bit more about the company, and I just want to know more about you, really. Like, who are you at Langle and what's your background?
Who I am is harder to describe. How did I get here might be a bit easier. Okay. So I've only ever worked for two businesses. I joined Langle's about 7 years ago, but before that I worked for British Steel for 25 years. It will come as no surprise that I'm a metallurgist, i.e. I studied and know about metals, and I've used that on and off for 30 years. But I came to Langle because I was looking for a bit more excitement and freedom, you know, the chance to get involved in more things. So here, sorry, I get involved in all sorts, and that's great.
And, you know, you just said you're a metallurgist. What made you get into that in the first place? I think that's the first thing people want to know.
I wasn't one of these people that decided at an early age I wanted to do this or be that. I guess I'm a little bit more interested in engineering and in science. My dad was heavily involved in CNC machine tools for years and years and years, but I was probably just looking for a practical subject, you know, a little bit more hands-on, that combined a bit of engineering and a bit of science, and sort of fell into it. But once you've got a degree in metallurgy, what are you going to do with it?
Well,
so working for a metals company is an obvious fit.
So what did you have to do to get your degree? Because this is, to me, because this is the basis of what it is that you do today and what kind of is your USP as a company. But what do you have to personally do to get that as a title?
So
where do we start?
Well, it was 4 years of my life at Sheffield University is the simple answer. But while I was there, you get to learn all about different metals, how they're made, how they perform, why they perform. You get into the fundamentals of microstructure and grain size and dislocations and all this wonderful stuff that happens on the inside of a metal that you don't see. But if you understand that, then you understand why they perform in the way they perform and how to bend them and shape them and machine them and just all of the different things they could be used about them. So it's not really a party piece to say, hi, I'm Rod and I'm a metallurgist, but it has been useful if you're in a business that deals with metals all day long.
Absolutely. Maybe not down the pub on a Friday night, but...
No. But, you know, in this sort of professional company, it's handy.
Oh, of course. So as a company, Langle Alloys, you've been going for quite some time, haven't you? Wasn't it like 1938?
Yeah, there's sort of two sides to the Langle Alloy story in a way. So there's the old stuff formed in 38, a sort of a joint venture in a way, or a coming together of two companies making all sorts of novel copper alloys and castings. It had its own foundry, and it was making its own designs of valves, patenting new metals. Really, really clever, innovative stuff 70, 80 years ago. But the business changed shape and size over time. And really for the last 15 to 20 years, we've been much more of a focused distributor. So the foundry was sold and left behind a sort of an embryonic distribution business. And that's just grown exponentially, really, over the last 10 or 15 years.
And what's your role here? Because we didn't quite get to that one. Should we not?
I started off doing a bit of marketing, updating the literature and the website, and that moved into looking after the sales team in the UK, and then slowly taken over the day-to-day operational side of the UK site, and now more recently keeping an eye on our US business as well. So I have the privilege of sort of skimming across the top of our business, UK and USA, operationally in sales, and just making sure we're hopefully doing the right things in the right way.
Why the US? Why are you here and there? Like, there's a great big wide world out there. So what's unique about the USA?
Our focus as a business is on a handful of sort of high strength, high performance alloys, and a really sort of obvious market for that is associated with the oil and gas industry. It's used in pumps and valves and fasteners and tooling and couplings and connectors, but a lot of those things will be used in and around oil and gas, chemical processing, that sort of end-use application. And if you think about parts of the world where that's a significant industry, well, the UK around Aberdeen at points in the past for sure. The US in Houston is a natural centre of gravity where a lot of activity still happens, but also a lot of decisions are made. Singapore, we've spent lots of time in there, and the Middle East and other parts of the world as well, but it's really just following the customers in a way. So the UK is a good place to be based from. That's where the business has been located for one way or another, but we followed our customers over to the States.
Okay. You're quite well travelled now then because of all of this.
I enjoy it. It's a great opportunity. It's nice to travel anyway. It gives you a fresh perspective. You learn new things. And at times it's a privilege to get to see bits of the world that you wouldn't ordinarily choose to go on holiday. So I've had more trips than I care to remember to India as we've developed sales there. Singapore, where we've had long-standing business and we exhibit every year or two. And the US, which is important given that we've got a large warehouse and a team of people over there as well.
Oh, okay. Let's come back to the UK then, because of course you're our new sponsors. Yay. We've done some videos today. How was that?
Nerve-wracking. Scary.
And scary. It's not me though.
No. It's just not what I do on a daily basis. So
no,
it feels a bit awkward.
Yeah.
And a bit different. And why is everybody looking at me?
Yeah. But then
I feel better now. It's over.
Oh, well, you've got tomorrow as well, so no pressure.
Okay. Now you tell me.
But just talking about the UK, and I'm going to ask you some kind of personal questions about like what you've been like some of your proudest moments being in this industry and stuff. But for me, I just, we talk to a lot of machinists. Do the machinists fully understand what you do? I know that's quite a hard question. Or what is it that you have to do? Do you have to educate the machine? Like what are you doing on a daily basis?
I sometimes say that our business is simple, or it should be simple. At the end of the day, the people we source our metal from will take 6, 9, 12 months to make what we order from them. And they want to sell us tons at a time of each individual size. Whereas the machinists will want potentially one little piece and they'll want it tomorrow. So we just sit in the middle of that supply chain in a way to facilitate it, to supply smaller cut pieces on a shorter lead time. And that side of our business should be really simple. However, there's two parts to it. Cutting a piece of metal and putting it on a pallet and shipping it somewhere in the UK or elsewhere in the world is easy. But that's only a small part of our order mix. The end uses and the customers where these bits of metal and products are ending up are generally safety critical, mission critical, really difficult applications. And so the end users will have like a whole plethora of additional requirements over and above. So we want a piece of metal, but it has to meet this demanding end user's requirements. And so it needs...
Who drives that?
It's the end user. It's the ultimate person in the field who's responsible for the performance of that metal component at the bottom of an oil well, or
On
the
an
undercarriage of a
aeroplane.
plane, or a pump operating a critical part of a large plant. They need quite often the peace of mind that the metal is going to perform. And because of historical experiences when things have not gone as planned, they've learned that they need this additional test or this additional sample or this additional inspection. And it's all perfectly logical and reasonable. It just adds a layer of complexity to what is otherwise just a lump of metal.
Yeah.
So we have to interpret all of those requirements. We have to then undertake all of that additional testing and paperwork and admin to give them that sort of confidence in a way that it's going to be fine, the metal's going to perform, the component will last forever. That's where the simple bit starts to feel a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
The other part of it is we're having to order stuff today that's not going to turn up for another 12 months. So we're predicting what our customers want based on what they've used historically.
How's that going?
Impossible, because it's a bit like driving your car forward only using the rear view mirror.
Yes.
We know what people have bought from us. We know what they've needed in the past. And somehow we have to predict what they're going to need in the future. And nobody ever has an accurate forecast. So we have to use a bit of science and a bit of magic to try and make sure we've got the right amount of stock in the right place of the right things at the right time.
It's like you're having to predict the future and invest your money there. And is that risky? Is that a bad question? I'm going to ask it you anyway. Is that quite scary?
It would be scary if it was my money as opposed to just the company I work with, and that's a glib answer. The reality is, it's difficult. It's challenging. The metal doesn't go off. It's not a perishable good. It's not tomatoes or fruit. So if we buy the wrong stuff and it perishes and it has to go in the bin, so it will ultimately get sold at some point. It might just take you years to sell it if you buy the wrong stuff. And that's just money tied up, dead money on the shelf that you can't make a decent return from. So you've got to accept a bit of risk and a bit of uncertainty in terms of what you stock. The other one is that metal prices go up and down.
Yes.
So picking the right time to buy so that you're always going to have competitive pricing is another challenge. And that's been a big problem for the market over the last 12 or 18 months.
I've heard that. And I have
You
heard
will
that.
have heard
yes,
that.
Quite a bit.
You'll have heard that from everybody you ever speak to, I'm sure.
So what advice, actually, before I go on, because I've got to tell you about something else that I'm excited to ask you about, but what advice would you give to someone then when they're buying, if they've got a machine shop and they go, I want to use Langle Alloys, what advice would you give to them personally?
I think for the machine shops who are in an awkward position a lot of the time because they're in the middle of the supply chain as well, unless they've got a longer term contract or some visibility of demand from their customer, they're somewhat at the vagaries of the spot market. But if they have got a bit of visibility, if they have got a contract, then it does give them the opportunity of talking to us, and we can set stock aside. We can buy at the right time, we can leave it in the racks in the warehouse, and we can allow them to call it off over a 12, 24-month period. So that avoids them potentially stocking out that they needed a certain size of a certain alloy, and we haven't got any, and then they're paying through the nose for it. So it avoids that. And it just means that things like additional testing or inspection can be done on a larger quantity. And they become just much more cost effective as well, rather than spot purchases. There are no economies of scale. There's no savings really to be made. It's just today's price, and everything else is over and above that. but it will cost the same to inspect one bar as it will to inspect 1 meter. So do the whole bar, and then you can share the costs over multiple components.
Yes.
If you can.
If you can. And you've got that confidence.
But I get it that a lot of the machine shops we deal with, they are not in control of what they're ordering from day to day or week to week. They are picking up the spot business of their customers. And it's a difficult one.
Yeah. Moving on, you talked about inspecting. There's a gentleman outside who I said could be a very good midwife. Why did I say this?
I think
he agreed.
I think he suggested that his qualification for ultrasonic inspection was equivalent to that needed by a midwife.
Yes, he did, didn't
which
he?
I'd never heard him describe it that way. But because so many of our customer orders require additional inspection, I think we've got 4 members of the team that are level 2 qualified inspectors, which means that if we get orders with that additional requirement on, we can just get one of them to drop on the order and inspect it there and then.
But tell us what is the inspection? Because people are thinking, what is it he's doing?
Well, it is as simple as we in the same way as you would put jelly on a pregnant lady's tummy, we
Yes.
put a jelly, a couplant on a metal bar, and we pass an ultrasonic probe along the length of the bar, and we're scanning for potential internal defects. Now, these bars have all been inspected when they were manufactured, so we're just providing a secondary inspection, but at a greater level of detail, a higher resolution. We're moving much more slowly and in different ways to the way it's inspected. So it's just another level of confidence or certainty that there is nothing in the inside of that bar that would cause a problem, and that would only be visible after you've already invested hours and hours and hours of expensive machining time, or it fails at some point years down the line in the field.
And he thought he was doing his job wrong one day, didn't he? He came to you.
We had one of the guys that I say recently, he'd gone through the testing process, and he'd passed all of his exams and been fully signed off, and he'd been inspecting for a few months without ever finding anything. And he was starting to question whether he was actually doing it properly or not. So he was pleased as punch when he found his first defect.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't happen very often. The quality of the products is spot on, but very occasionally.
That's what it's for.
And he'd gone months and months, like tens of jobs, if not hundreds of jobs, without finding anything. But when he did, all of a sudden he was reassured that he had been doing it right all along, and he was doing the right thing. He just wasn't finding anything because there was nothing to find.
Oh dear. What's been your most demanding request then? Because you've just said, of course, you've got somewhere in the US as well that you're working from, but you sat in front of us because, we've had a chat and we've done some filming today, but you were like, it still amazes you today that somewhere in a town in Brazil phones you up and they're requesting a particular material, and you're thinking, wow, that's us they're choosing. Nobody else is choosing you for that material. And you're quite proud of that, aren't you?
For me, it's really cool that I can walk around the warehouse. I can go into our dispatch area and I can see stuff labelled for Singapore, Brazil, New Zealand, Dubai, US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, lots of places, 50 odd different countries we have sold to in the last 12 months. So it's a real sort of world tour. The products end up in the most unusual of places. But I think you asked originally what was the most demanding order.
Let's go back to
different. That's a different thing because our Brazilian customers are reasonably straightforward. They might be supplying into the oil and gas industry, and they might require all sorts of additional testing, but it's pretty straightforward. But we've had a customer, not trying to give too much detail away.
No names.
But making a component for a critical application, and the metal it's made from is not that complicated, but where it's ending up is about as mission critical as you could possibly get.
Oh, really?
And so They needed additional inspection, additional testing. They'd wanted something that we'd call third-party testing or witnessing. So we'd have to bring people in to check over sampling of test pieces and the testing process. We were doing machining on it. We were supplying effectively a piece of metal that weighed a couple of 100 kilos. But I think there was 200 kilos of paperwork that went with it, you know, and just the sheer complexity of administering that order. But it was going into something that's going to operate for 30 years in the most difficult of conditions, and they needed absolute certainty that it was going to perform from day one without problem. So there was probably more value in the paperwork than in the metal. And that was just a real challenge. We were moving material backwards and forwards between steps and inspecting at every stage. Everything that we could do to test, we were doing it. So it was just challenging, just keeping on top of it all, because of course the customer has spent 3 or 4 months negotiating with you about this, and then when they finally place the order, they want it yesterday.
Yes.
Thanks a bunch. So,
I'm sure people are like driving or listening to this, just nodding away right now, going, yep, I've had that. Yep.
And that's frustrating, but it is what it is. You know, it comes with the territory. You deal with a purchasing person, then all of a sudden you have to deal with the engineers. And
do you think, you know, when you think, well, I know you've got a perspective on it, and you'll have a personal perspective and a professional perspective on it, but it's almost like it's a bit crazily far, the detail that we have to go into. You know, I was somewhere yesterday and I saw, I think it was a jet on, oh gosh, I can't remember. But basically, it was part of a plane. And I was thinking that was made something like 30, 40 years ago. And it's amazing how far we've gone. But it's almost like, you know, you've had to get a third-party person to look over your shadow what you do on a daily basis. That's a lot. We have to really, why are we doing all of this? Why?
we skirt around the edges of aerospace, but most people would be reassured to know that all of the components on the plane that they're flying at in 30,000 feet have been tested to the absolute limit, because that is as safety critical
absolutely
an application as you could imagine. But the alternative is, if you're making a critical piece of equipment that's sitting at the bottom of an oil well, to actually change it out if it fails could mean chartering a boat. Sending somebody down however many hundreds of feet to the bottom of the ocean, interrupting production for days or weeks. So the financial case rather than the life or death case, would be massive. The environmental case, if some of these components failed and didn't fail safe, would be significant as well. And they're really not so much difficult to put a cost to, but you just know the cost would be massive. So the additional time and effort to give you total peace of mind over the piece of metal, and then the inspection of the finished component that I'm sure the CNC machine shops are undertaking, and then the assembly and testing at the end user are onerous and rigorous. But what's the alternative?
I guess it's basically, ultimately, it's preventative, to learn from mistakes made in the past.
Absolutely.
And it's to prevent financial losses later down the line. So it's essential. That it is the way, it's the right way forward for us to evolve in every sense.
Absolutely. And the likelihood of defects that you wouldn't pick up through just standard inspection is very low. The story about my colleague that had spent 6 months ultrasonically testing, and it took him that long to find his first defect. But if that defect happened to align with a critical component in a critical application, put a cost to cost of failure. It would be astronomical.
Absolutely.
So sometimes for these applications, it's worth
every moment.
And we don't choose that. We just have to deal with it and provide it.
Absolutely. Proudest moment. What's one of your proudest moments? Because you actually told me quite an interesting story this morning.
Did I?
Yes.
I'm not, I didn't think I was one for, big grand stories and proclamations.
Well, you got a picture on the Statue of Liberty. That's one.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah. Go on then. Tell us that one and have a little think whilst you're telling us that one.
We've got this 80-year history, which is somewhat overlooked by a lot of the people that work in the business. They will struggle to imagine the fact that we used to have foundries and forges and design our own valves and patent our own metals. All of that is lost on them. But we do have books and books of old advertising and newspaper clippings and brochures.
It's really cool, actually. It's a big brown book. It's huge.
It's like Harry Potter's spell book.
It is. It's just actually very well described. It's like Harry Potter's spell book. You open it up, and I remember being at school, and you'd have to create tea-stained paper, didn't you? But it's all there naturally, and you got all these wonderful cutouts from magazines, and this is from 1938 onwards. So there was a war going on. It's really interesting that you've got that history. But one of them,
our product was used in the refurbishment of the Statue of Liberty. So at some point after its construction, it started corroding from the inside out and slowly falling apart. And at the time, we were developing products and sales in the States, and the product was picked up and used as about 9 tons of ferralium super duplex stainless steel holding the Statue of Liberty up on the inside. So on the outside, you see the lovely, patinaed bronze shape of the lady with the lamp. But on the inside, there's a load of super duplex stainless steel holding it all up and holding it together. So it's a pretty neat reference.
It is.
We don't do many statues. And,
No.
we did one recently where we were contacted by somebody looking for metal to support this statue of 4 horses. And at some point, I'll get round to chasing up the foundry that were using these bars, but it's not a day-to-day application that we're chasing. It's not
what you see all the time.
Yeah, it's not. It's nice. It's a bit of a novelty, and sure, Statue of Liberty is just one of those things that's difficult to beat. Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Your proudest moment then?
I'm not sure. I'm going to struggle with this one. I'd almost, plead the Fifth Amendment. I think we've done some pretty cool things within the business, but at a business level. So how sort of exciting they are to anybody from outside the business. But we've managed to grow significantly. And that's not just this last 12 months where the business environment's been favourable. It's over the last 7 or 8 years. So for me, the bit that I enjoy and the bit that causes me the most difficulty is people.
Okay.
But for me, it's been some of the people that I've been able to recruit and bring on and bring through the business and are still with us and doing good work, are doing nice things. We went more than 10 years without bringing in apprentices. And over the last 2 to 3 years, I think we brought in 6 or 7 people, all young people with no prior skills or knowledge. And they're all great. They give our business a really fresh perspective, and you take a bit of a chance on someone, but you get to see them develop and grow in front of you. And I think that's something I'm certainly, if not proud, then very pleased to see, and it's nice to say, I gave that kid a chance sort of thing. And, they've taken their first steps towards having a good job and a good career. Yeah.
It's unbelievable how much we learn from young people as well. MTD, we're exactly the same. And, we realise that you need both ends of the spectrum and in between for everything to work. Just before we kind of close on this one, you said something earlier after the interview. You said you like sticky projects. And that's kind of something that you said you like tricky, sticky projects that you can kind of get your teeth into. And that kind of excited me because I'm like, what are these types of projects? I guess that's one of the, you're nodding, you're crossing your, but what is it that kind of stands out for you there? Because you do love this. You love what you do.
We do. So there's the day job of buy metal, sell metal, and that's what pays the bills. But in terms of growing the business, you can grow it in different ways. So we've taken our sales into different markets, different countries. That's quite nice. We've taken our products into different applications, and that's quite challenging and difficult at times, but introducing people to your products and hopefully helping them solve problems. But some of the better orders, the nicer orders, also started from small acorns in a way, a question on the website or a meeting with a client. And I think this comes from the owner and sort of permeates down. If somebody asks us something, we're pretty clear, is it something that we stock and do? We'll take it on. If it isn't, we'll say no. But there's a gap in the middle where it's sort of stuff we know about and we stock, but not what we're set up to do today. Whether it's 40-foot long bars finished and tested to a different standard, or big lumps of sheet, or packages of plate and piping, or whatever. It's not the easy stuff, but it can be the most rewarding, both personally in terms of a challenge and often then financially, because it's the sort of stuff that other people would run away from.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing, because it's almost like you're good at something, so you've got that kind of covered, and it's the stuff that kind of keeps you on your toes, essentially, that keeps that fire in your belly.
And it's stuff that we know about. We've got people in the business that know metal. We've got people that know machining. We've got people with different sort of engineering industry backgrounds, and you can sort of pick and choose with ladle and team that knowledge and experience and come up with answers to questions you didn't fully understand at the beginning. What
are some of the demands in terms of what your customers will ask for? Because then, let's go back down to the metal, because I'm kind of coming to an end here, but I have actually got quite a few questions I want to ask you. Oh dear. What are people always asking for in terms of materials? Of course, it's metal, of course, but it's corrosive. What are people asking you for?
Normally, that's exactly what I want. Can you do it more cheaply?
Oh right, okay.
That's the simple one. Or can I have it more quickly?
Okay.
Particularly in the current circumstances where there's been such a high demand that there are gaps in most people's stock holdings. So if a large project comes along, people are asking for things that are thin on the ground.
Right.
And then they want them at a lower price as well. And yeah. So that's the easy stuff, because that's literally every 5 minutes.
And I see people ask on LinkedIn, it's like, have you got this, have you got that? And you can feel the hurry.
And people are just sort of trading around, to desperately try and find something. And sometimes we have to be a little bit creative. We haven't got this product, but we've got that one. Can we help you get a concession with the end user? We haven't got this size, we've got that size, but can we process it and make it fit for purpose? Having to just think a little bit laterally. But we put a web chat feature on our site a few years ago, and we get all sorts of weird and wonderful questions on there, but some of them are quite interesting. So hydrogen applications are a real area of interest at the moment, and a lot of activity in terms of designing equipment to handle hydrogen is going on, and most of it uses standard commodity grades of product. But as the developments are starting to go into more challenging end requirements, they're looking for stuff that's stronger, higher strength, and all of a sudden there's far less knowledge about which grades can be used. And then you do find a grade, but then they want to use it in a size that's not commercially available. So all of a sudden the hamster wheels spinning to think this could be a really interesting long-term opportunity, but they need that grade in a size that you can't make that way. How could you pull it together, as a trial, a development, a project, which won't make any financial sense today? It will just be a money pit. But if it was to grow at the level that people are expecting, it could be a really big market segment for us in a few years' time. So it's just having the willingness to actually investigate some of these inquiries rather than just say no.
And that kind of lends it back to the point that you made at the beginning, is the fact that you have to take that element of risk in driving the car backwards, driving the car forwards, but only using the rear. I can't do
using your rearview mirror to predict the future.
Exactly that. But that kind of lends itself to what you've just said, is getting a scope of the market, getting a feel for it, and then working out what you can do to back it up when the time is right.
A lot of the stuff that we do is really quite transactional, whether it's spot purchases or just straightforward meeting requirements. And even if those requirements are a little bit more demanding, we've set our business up to be able to handle that. But for whatever reason, we sometimes find it difficult to say no to these more challenging ones. And that's sometimes where the new business comes from. And I don't mean new business just in terms of a one-off sale, but you entering a market segment that you'd not been in previously. And maybe sometimes I'm more moderating than the business owner, that he'll be very keen to go into lots of areas, and I'll be suggesting we just stick to the knitting and, keep it simple. Yeah. But there's space between that for us to do both.
Just to finish off, really, there's a couple of ladies that you've mentioned that are integral to the business, only in conversation.
Okay.
And these might be people that they, if people were speaking to you from time to time, that they'd know. So you've got a lady who you pointed out to me that is integral to the office.
Oh,
she's been here so long.
Yeah. So if anybody is listening, in the UK from a CNC machine shop, and they've dealt with Langle Alloys, then they will have dealt with Sinead. Sinead's my UK sales manager. She joined the business 15 years ago as an apprentice and has never left. Yep. She knows where all the bodies are buried. Yeah. She knows everything about the way the business works and operates. She understands the challenges that our customers face. She understands the specifications and the weird and wonderful requirements that these people will have. And there are customers that she will have a great relationship with, and the customers will use that relationship to help sort their sourcing issues. So anybody in the UK who's dealt with Langle Alloys will have dealt with Sinead. Yeah, for sure.
It was just really nice, because you don't often see it. You often hear about people changing jobs and having not all that loyalty, but it was really nice just to hear that and give her a bit of a shout out, because I think that's,
I'll try a little bit harder, maybe to drag her in front of the camera at some point, but there's no escaping her, at least if you're transacting with us.
Brilliant. And was there somebody on the road as well that works for you that you mentioned?
Quite possibly, but we might be mixing stories. So we've got, one of the things that we do as a business is get out and about. So I've got sales managers who are out in Germany this week. One of my other sales managers was out in the Middle East last week. Both young fellas rather than young ladies. But that's part of being inquisitive in a way, getting out of the office and investing the time and effort to speak to existing customers, but trying to find some new ones as well.
Yeah. Well, it's been so lovely chatting to you. And I'm going to tell the audience this as well. I was like, we're going to do a podcast. And you were like, a what? A podcast. So what conversation are you going to have with your daughter around the table tonight?
I'm going to tell her that I'm literally an influencer. She'll be so impressed after she's finished rolling her eyes that I'm down with the kids now.
Absolutely. Dad's done a podcast today. She'll be like, yeah, whatever, Dad.
No, I'm not listening to it.
Rodney, it's been a pleasure talking with you on this podcast and just finding out, I'd say it's just a tip of the iceberg of what you guys do here and some of your stories. And I've got a funny feeling there's a lot more that you could tell us. But maybe that's for another day. But
if I told you, I'd have to kill you, sort of thing.
On one of the bodies. That
Yeah.
No, that's it's been really good fun, and you've got another video to film for tomorrow. So we're going to have another good day tomorrow, aren't we?
I'm sure we are.
We absolutely are. With confidence, we're going to have a great day.
A good night's sleep first, and then a good day.
Yeah, it will be. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the MTDCNC podcast, sponsored by Langle Alloys, specialists in a wide range of exotic materials for any application for all your engineering needs.